Here's everything you missed in WandaVision Episode 7. Things just got real over on WandaVision, and I know we say this every week, but this week things got really real for real. WandaVision's 7th episode, aptly titled Breaking the Fourth Wall, is one of the most significant episodes to date and gave us a boatload of surprises, shocking reveals, and a pitch-perfect parody of sitcoms like Modern Family and The Office. More importantly though, there is a post-credit scene, so if you somehow missed that, make sure you pause this video and watch it first. I will please stand by in the meantime. And by the same token, if you haven't watched WandaVision yet, make sure you do that right now because we have so much stuff to talk about. Easter eggs, comic book references, theories, so much more. So unless you're a snooper, this is your first and last spoiler warning. Otherwise, make like Darcy and find a way to escape.
Hard pass.
Alright, let's get into it, shall we? It was Agatha all along. Can you believe it? I mean, we kind of knew that all along, but still, it's crazy. Episode 7 picks up, though, with the morning after Wanda Maximoff significantly expands the borders on the Hex. Wanda wakes up in hexagonal patterned sheets, which is one of the few consistencies in this episode, because otherwise, the Hex is kind of going haywire. Because after basically going Super Saiyan Scarlet last week, Wanda seems drained, depressed, and off of her game. What's more, she's more candid than usual about the reality of this situation, admitting to the viewer at home that she let her fear and anger get the best of her and she intentionally expanded the borders of the false world she created, which we then see out in a Modern Family-style cutaway. Our first clue that something's amiss happens when Billy and Tommy give Wanda a wake-up call. Once again, Billy and Tommy are dressed in color schemes that correspond to their specific comic book outfits of their superheroic alter egos, Wiccan and Speed. And while their superpowers aren't on full display during this episode, they're definitely still present, as we see when Billy complains about his head being really noisy due to all the ambient telepathic chatter in Westview, or how Tommy always gets to the video game controller first because of his super speed. Speaking of video games, they have a problem. Their video game controller keeps changing form. It starts as a Wiimote, then becomes a GameCube controller, then an Atari joystick, and then finally a bunch of Uno cards, and they can't reverse it. Wanda is seemingly losing her grip on Westview's reign, so maybe she pushed herself too hard when she expanded its borders. While she changed the entire world of Westview's time period, she did forget to change out of her Sokovian fortune teller Halloween costume, which once again is a reference to her classic comic book outfit. In the fridge, we see more cans of Kane Cola named for WandaVision unit production manager Mary Kane, and sadly we learn that Wanda did not buy Bova milk like episode 2 teased, rather she opted for Westview Dairy almond milk. And much like the controller, this too keeps changing form and eras. It becomes a carton of whole milk with a vintage picture of a missing child on it, and then it morphs into a glass bottle of milk like my dad used to help deliver way back when. Now Wanda's eating a bowl of Sweeney Sugar Snaps, which could be a reference to Max Sweeney, who works on WandaVision as a digital asset manager. It could also be referencing the various snaps of the Infinity Gauntlet. With a clown on the front and circus imagery on the back, this is likely referencing the newly transformed agents of S.W.O.R.D. on the edge of the Hex, who are now trapped inside of the emotional labyrinth of Westview and are currently in circus garb. But who can be certain? Not Wanda, that's for sure, because she chalks all of this up to a case of the Mondays.
Am I right?
While this is happening, the radio in the background, WNDA, mentions not a thing weighing heavily on your conscience, and all the kids who were out on Halloween have now been safely returned to their beds until they're trotted out sometime next year for the next holiday episode, or maybe a not-so-routine traffic stop later this episode.
For the children.
The intro is a pitch-perfect parody of The Office right down to its piano and cheesy coffee cup, and all the imagery here features Wanda's name, really hammering home the whole day-to-herself intention of this episode of Wanda's life. There's also a creepy shot where it says, "I know what you did, Wanda," which kind of feels like the most terrifying message Vision could have left for her on the refrigerator. Also, please note the cheeky created by Wanda Maximoff credit at the end, which is just, you'll love to see it. Another potential Easter egg is the 122-822 number on the license plate during the intro, which is the exact number on a dossier about an Omega-level planetary event called the Pulse in the old Marvel Avengers Alliance game, which is probably just a coincidence, but a fun one nonetheless. Outside of the Hex, we see the full implications of exactly what Wanda did, because not only is S.W.O.R.D. building a new forward operating base 8 miles away, but the Hex crackles with bright red magical energy in broad daylight. Previously, it was largely imperceptible to the human eye unless you got close enough. Hayward seems weirdly chill about the fact that he lost so many of his agents, much to the chagrin of his colleague, but more importantly, we learn that Wanda is no longer broadcasting WandaVision outside of the Hex, and SWORD cannot see inside. That said, they clearly seem to have some sort of plan here, but what is it? Hayward mentions they're launching today, and to make sure the team has everything they need, but what exactly could Hayward be launching? Maybe it's connected to Project Cataract, the top-secret initiative that Darcy uncovered in his files. Or maybe whatever SWORD was building while they made Vision reenact West Coast Avengers number 42 when they had his corpse for like 5 years. And like so many me's in college, Vision wakes up in a field all by himself near the circus surrounded by clowns. Now this was previously the SWORD base, but they're no longer the Sentient Weapon Observation and Response Division. According to the elephant logo on the clown car, they're now the Spectacular World of Rapturous Diversion. This is both a manifestation of what Wanda thinks of SWORD, and a callback to when Darcy referred to their truck full of scientific experts as a clown car in episode 4, We Interrupt This Program. There's a moment of panic when Vision realizes he's still dressed like his normal Avenger self, but thankfully the strongman/ringleader, who's actually the SWORD agent that gave Darcy the TV previously, he mistakes him for the new clown, so Vision's red face and goofy costume don't look out of place. Now, fun fact, the very first Avengers comic ever features the Hulk working at a circus where everyone presumes that he's a robot given his freakish strength. I like the parallel here where everyone assumes that the Vision, who is a robot with freakish strength, is actually a flesh and blood clown, which... God, that's a horrible phrase. Flesh and blood clown. What other kind of clown is there? And speaking of comics, the A9X on the red truck's license plate could just be a random string of numbers, or it could reference Avengers 9 and X-Men 9 respectively. The former involves Wonder Man, whose brainwaves gave the Vision his personality, tragically dying to save the Avengers. The latter is the first time the Avengers meet the X-Men and features a villain named Lucifer to boot. Seems fitting, but I digress. We also learn that Darcy's new role on WandaVision is that of an escape artist working for the circus, so sorry to disappoint literally everyone online who presumed that she would be her waitress character from Two Broke Girls, but you were wrong. Hey, you gotta live with it. I do every day, so moving on. Back at the house, Wanda is clearly having a tough time. When Billy asks if she wants help finding Vision, Wanda shoots back, if he doesn't want to be here, there's nothing I can do about it. That is a marked turnabout from how she acted about Vision's free will previously. I mean, she could absolutely do something about it, right? Things only get stranger from there as Billy asks about their Uncle Pietro and what he mentioned about re-killing their dad. Wanda immediately shuts this down, saying not to believe anything he says and that Pietro isn't their uncle. So if he isn't Pietro Maximoff, who is he? Well, based on Pietro's intimate metatextual knowledge of everything Wanda was doing in Westview last episode, as well as his ability to break the fourth wall, chances are that he's a powerful magical being, or at least being piloted by one, as we see at the episode's end. It feels like we can probably rule out it actually being Pietro from another part of the multiverse. Rather, it could be the demon Mephisto in disguise, or maybe the evil elder god Chthon using a multiversal Pietro's body as a vessel, as we theorized in a recent episode of Nerdist News. We know magic's involved, and we know that he's not himself. No one knows for sure, though, least of all Wanda, as she straight up tells us. She has no answers for what's going on.
Zip, zero, zip.
Clearly, Wanda is being manipulated, which we'll get to in just a little bit. Wanda tries to brush it off with the joke about the kids having tough skin because the Vision's made of vibranium, which is the toughest substance in the MCU, but clearly something is awry. Needing some time to herself, Wanda sends the boys off with a conveniently timed Agnes, who reveals that she once bit a child, which takes on a far more sinister tone, giving the ending of this episode.
I actually did bite a kid once.
And perhaps of note, Agnes mentioning her mole is played for laughs, but given the revelation at the end of this episode, it could be a witch's mark or a devil's mark, imperfections in the skin, which witch hunters in the 17th century believed denoted someone was actually a witch, not whether or not they could float. In the living room, Wanda's hex magic keeps rearranging the furniture and changing it through different eras, warping reality around her. Before she puts it all back, we see a portrait of a cow on the living room wall, which I'm hoping is another Bova reference, because if you have an anthropomorphic cow from the comics that serves as your main character's mother figure, well, you better well use it as much as possible. I want Bova IRL. And next up in Overthinking Random Numbers, we see 35482 on the back of the SWORD SUV. That could reference both Avengers 354, which involves the Vision and the villainous Grim Reaper, whose untimely death we saw teased in episode 2, as well as the fact that in the year 1982, that was the year that Monica Rambeau first appeared in the Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16. Again, probably a bit of a reach, but that is our promise to you, overthinking everything. Jimmy Woo finally gets Darcy's email about Project Cataract and confirmation that Hayward was not decommissioning Vision, rather he was trying to bring his sentient weapon back online. Except no matter what they tried, S.W.O.R.D. couldn't get Vision to work until Wanda stole Vision's body and brought him to the Hex. We see schematics of the Vision as well, which they clearly had on hand, maybe so they can build Sentinels. Again, I'm going to keep harping on this. Now, given that a cataract is a condition that blurs your vision, it seems like they wanted to take control of the Synthezoid, but to what end? This also seems to be confirmation that the Vision is well and truly dead, and it's only Wanda's magic that was powerful enough to destroy the Mind Stone in the first place that's keeping him alive. But thankfully, Wanda has allies on the outside. Jimmy wants to tell Wanda about what Hayward is doing, and Monica clearly agrees. Then we finally get that big reveal we've all been waiting for, the identity of that mystery aerospace engineer. And we can lay that fan theory to rest for the time being because it's not Reed Richards or Victor Von Doom or Adam Brashear or Riri Williams. It's someone named Major Goodner, a friend of Monica's who's loyal to Monica and her late mother Maria. Now, there is a chance that Major Goodner is not the aerospace engineer, and they're saving that reveal for later, but it kind of feels like this was yet another red pickled herring that WandaVision dangled in front of us. Then again, speaking with Comic Book recently, Tiana Paris teased this reveal even further, saying, "I can't wait to see what y'all's reaction is when you learn who the aerospace engineer is." So maybe this was another carefully crafted fake out, maybe the real aerospace engineer was the friends and theories we made along the way, or maybe the big reveal is still coming. But that's okay, because Monica had one of the biggest reveals of this entire episode, which we'll get to in just a little bit. Back to the scene at hand, Major Goodner brought an advanced S.W.O.R.D. space rover with her, designed to Monica's specifications, and it looks like the pickup truck version of Toyota's lunar cruiser that they designed for JAXA, the Japanese equivalent of NASA. Back at the circus, Vision cuts to the chase and wakes up Darcy using his powers, and she continues to be a stand-in for all of us as a huge fan of the show and not knowing the answer to any of our important questions like, what's going on here, and who's that imposter Pietro?
Part of me secretly wanted a guest spot on the show, but seriously, that sucked.
And while it's not the exact same figure, it's possible the Hula Girl dashboard figure is a reference to the recurring Hula Girl on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And considering we had the mention of Hydra's mind-controlling soap during that Hydra soap commercial in episode 3, anything is possible.
I make my own soap now.
Meanwhile, back at home, things are reaching a fever pitch with Wanda losing control as the entire living room rapidly shifts era and styles before Wanda's eyes, including the return of that pesky stork in a cloud of red magical smoke. So is this Mephistork as we jokingly but maybe not so jokingly theorized? Probably not, but that bird is still sus as hell. All kidding aside, this is genuinely scary. Wanda confesses she doesn't know why it's happening, why it's all falling apart, and then a voice off camera, who we now know is Agnes, asks Wanda if she thinks this is what she deserves. It's a shocking break of the format, and it upsets Wanda even further.
What? You're not supposed to talk.
We then cut to a commercial for Nexus, a unique antidepressant that works to anchor you back to your reality or the reality of your choosing. And this is particularly fascinating because in the comics, Nexus is the cross-dimensional gateway that connects all possible realities in the Marvel multiverse. Wanda Maximoff is considered to be a Nexus being for Marvel's main reality in the comics, meaning that she is an anchor point for that reality, someone who can affect the probability of the future of that reality. According to Scarlet Witch number 4, Nexus beings are also nodes of mystic energy for their worlds, which could be a big reason why Wanda is being targeted. Plus, Nexus beings are watched with a very keen eye by the Time Variance Authority, who will meet in the upcoming Loki series, so maybe there's another connection to the MCU's future there as well. Now, obviously we know we're heading into the Multiverse of Madness in Doctor Strange 2, but maybe the Hex could open a gateway to the Nexus in this reality. Or maybe some sinister being has identified Wanda as a Nexus being. Either way, the commercial's tagline of "because the world doesn't revolve around you," or does it, is a major clue. So maybe Wanda will ask her doctor about these strange side effects. Equally eye-catching is that 10.3% mentioned in the Nexus commercial, because the number 103 has already appeared several times this season and likely references Avengers 103, in which Quicksilver goes missing and Wanda is kidnapped by Sentinels, i.e. sentient weapons. She's used as a power source for a doomsday device. This feels awfully fitting because Wanda, just as much as the Vision, is being used as a living, sentient weapon. Now, I know a lot of you folks out there are fans of the commercials as Infinity Stones theory, but I'm not so sure we can make the case for Nexus representing the Power Stone the same way that some of those other parallels lined up so neatly. If you want to know more about that theory, we've got a video for you, but in the meantime, I do think it might be dead in the water, so RIP to a real one. After the commercial break, we see the inside of Agnes's house for the first time, where things are unsettling to say the least, because Billy can't hear any of the Westview citizens' thoughts in Agnes's house, and he can't hear her thoughts either, and we'll learn why in the episode's shocking finale. We get another mention of Ralph.
Ralph, my husband, Ralph.
But still no sight of this missing person. And speaking of missing persons, we still think that Ralph could be the person for whom the FBI are looking, and that Ralph definitely isn't his real name. But for more on that, check out our recent theory video, which I will link to in the description below. Next up, Monica's plans to just drive through the barrier of the Hex go awry immediately as the Hex begins to rewrite the fabric of the space rover and yeets it out of there like Wanda did to Monica earlier this season. Now put your tinfoil hats on for this one, because Monica punches in the number 389, which could correspond to March 1989, as well as 42. West Coast Avengers 42, published in March 1989, is titled One of Our Androids is Missing, and has been directly visually referenced this season already when Wanda finds Vision's disassembled body in Sword's lab. Now this is probably just a coincidence, but you can never be too certain with WandaVision. What follows is one of the coolest origins for any character in the MCU, as Monica bravely walks back into the Hex, and while pushing through the barrier, Monica's states of being begin to displace. We see a full spectrum of Monicas. We hear echoes of important people in her life, like her mother Maria, as well as Carol Danvers herself, Captain Marvel. Finally, at long last, Monica's eyes pulse blue with energy, and she emerges through the other side of the barrier unscathed and born anew. This is the end result of the Hex rewriting Monica's cells on a molecular level, and why her MRIs came back so wonky. She has superpowers now. Monica can see through the electromagnetic spectrum and how it flows through Westview. A new hero is born. A classic Marvel character has joined the fray. And while she could still choose Photon as a superhero name to honor her late mother and her call sign, I have a feeling that based on her powers, she's gonna roll with Spectrum. And quick side note, if that was the most heavily armored space rover that Sword has, maybe that could tee them up making the same mistake with the Fantastic Four spaceship if they do in fact wind up being a part of Sword's now defunct space program. And let's face it, cosmic rays don't have anything on the Hex, but they do have quite a bit of radiation. While all of this is happening, Darcy and Vision give us a nice slice of the Vision Quest storyline as the Vision relearns all about his past. Things get super meta as Darcy breaks down the timeline of the MCU, including what happened to Vision and Wanda in Infinity War and Endgame.
There are a few extra steps, but to set up the context.
I came back and died again.
Darcy even name drops the title of the show. Meanwhile, Vision and Darcy are also calling out a series of preposterous events like sun and rain, construction, red lights, and school kids, all of which Vision thinks are engineered by Wanda to keep him from coming home. More importantly, we get further confirmation that science cannot explain how and why Vision is still alive and why he can't leave the Hex. Again, I think it's connected to just how powerful Wanda's magic is, which is why letting go of the Hex is something she absolutely won't consider. After that, Monica confronts Wanda directly, who may or may not have just taken some of those Nexus pills, but probably not because it looks like those were red and gold, whereas these ones are white. Wanda, now wearing the Lazy Sunday version of her Avengers costume, is not happy to see Monica. She doesn't want anything to do with her and doesn't want to hear anything about Hayward's evil plans for her robot husband. She immediately resorts to violence, flinging Monica out of her house with her hex magic, accusing Monica and Sword of sending Pietro in to deceive her. Monica, though, pulls off a sweet-ass superhero landing, then discharges bluish energy, unharmed by Wanda's bullying. Monica stands up to Wanda, calling her on her BS and telling her to take her out before she finally begs her not to let Hayward make her the villain. But leave it to the world's nosiest neighbor of all time to interrupt in the creepiest way possible as Agnes swoops in to take Wanda away. And when she does, Wanda seems kind of stunned before she reverts back to anger at Monica's demands. The tension dissipates and life returns to normal in Westview, at least as normal as it can be. Also, if you'll notice, the mailman is now a delivery person working for an Amazon-esque service called Presto, which is the second best term a magician can use.
Flourish!
While Vision finally realizes he doesn't have to do interviews, he can just fly home because he's a superhero, Agnes takes Wanda back to her house, where the twins are nowhere to be seen. Just half-eaten sandwiches and Yo Gabba Gabba on the TV. At Agnes's suggestion, Wanda goes down to the basement to look for them, and then the show becomes a straight-up horror movie. A bluish-green cicada crawls on the curtains, which can symbolize rebirth or transformation, but here it reminds us of Avengers 38, in which Mephisto appears as a creepy crawly bug, and he's referred to as the fly that laid a billion maggots, which, it's just gross. In the basement, Wanda finds a creepy passage covered over with vines and tree roots. When she follows it, Wanda discovers a chamber full of glowing mystical runes, cabinets full of skulls and magical curios, and most importantly, a grimoire that's radiating sinister reddish-orange energy. Demon heads mark various pillars in the basement, and there's even what looks like the symbol of Baphomet in the background, just in case you weren't sure, this is an evil place. Now, this book is likely the Darkhold. It's a wretched tome teeming with eldritch secrets, Stygian sorcery, and a way for the evil elder god Chthon to bind himself to Earth. In the comics, Chthon marked Wanda from birth as a potential vessel for him to eventually take over, and that's partly why she's able to access chaos magic and manipulate reality. Considering Chthon and the Darkhold are also responsible for the creation of vampires in the Marvel Universe, that could also serve as our narrative link for Mahershala Ali's upcoming Blade movie as well. That said, this book could also be connected to a specific book of druidic magic that first appeared in the pages of Captain America 256 and is ultimately connected to a mystical being known as Samhain. Wanda clashes with Samhain in the Vision and Scarlet Witch #5 as well, and I say this because Samhain in the Marvel Universe looks awfully similar to the design on Agnes's brooch, and I'm sorry, did I say Agnes? I meant Agatha Harkness, because we were right. Guess who? It's Agatha, baby!
Lovely to finally meet you, dear.
In the most shocking moment we all knew was coming since Pietro arrived, Agatha reveals her true identity to Wanda, as well as her crackling purple magic. And that puts her choice of outfits in this episode into sharp relief. It also means that Signor Scratchy is most likely a reference to Nicholas Scratch, Agatha's son, in the comics. Agatha's big reveal is accompanied by a truly spectacular magical musical number in the style of The Munsters, wherein Agatha reveals that she has been behind everything happening in Westview. It's been Agatha all along. She's been messing up everything the entire time and pulling every evil string, including bringing Pietro to Wanda's door. Worst of all, and don't listen to this, Bones, she killed Sparky the dog as well. It's an incredibly dark revelation because, while we called that Agnes was going to be a portmanteau of Agatha Harkness, I really wasn't sure she was going to be straight up evil. That said, I still believe that Agatha Harkness is operating on the behalf of a darker, eviler entity who's trying to leverage Wanda to gain access to the multiverse given Wanda's status as a Nexus being. So who is Agatha working for, and where are the twins? Well, those two are connected. In the comics, Billy and Tommy aren't actually real, they're fragments of the demon Mephisto's soul. And when Wanda stops concentrating on the twins during periods of immense stress, they actually disappear from this plane of existence because they're not real, they've been magicked into being. To prevent Wanda from going mad with grief, Agatha wipes Wanda's memories of the kids, which is just all types of messed up and ultimately ends in tragedy and mutant genocide when Wanda remembers they exist, goes mad with grief when she realizes they don't, kills a bunch of people, and transforms reality as we know it into a world shaped in her family's image known as the House of M. So the twins and Vision will be Agatha's ultimate bargaining chips as the series comes to a head in its final 2 episodes. But something tells me that Wanda is a ticking time bomb edging ever closer to exploding in everyone's face. Her best hope for survival right now might just be Monica Rambeau, who unfortunately during the show's first ever post-credits scene is caught red-handed snooping around Agatha Harkness's basement by Pietro Maximoff.
Snooper's gonna snoop.
Or not Pietro, whoever this Pietro really is. Maybe he's Agatha's son, Nicholas Scratch. Maybe this is Ralph, the FBI's missing person. Or maybe it's still Mephisto or someone using Pietro's body as a beef puppet. We'll just call him Mephasto for now because of the super speed and because I'm so tired. Another fun detail is that Agatha's house is basically a one-to-one copy of the house from Bewitched, which is extra fitting given what we just learned about her. And once again, we are left with even more questions than answers as we head into the final 2 episodes of WandaVision.
I don't understand what's happening.
But there you have it, folks. That is everything we spotted in WandaVision Episode 7. As always, we'll keep you up to date over on Nerdist.com about all things WandaVision, but in the meantime, tell us, what did you think of Episode 7? Did you spot anything that we missed? Let's discuss in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.